we'll see if this works. I really appreciate you being the first.
Yeah, no worries, man.
Awesome. Dylan, it is so great to connect with you. Thank you very much for joining me.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking the time.
It's really an honor. Actually, I was chatting with Mike Kelly maybe 3 months ago, and he was looking through some of my images, and he said, "You need to check out this guy Dylan Patrick. His work is amazing, and you guys have a very similar style." And lo and behold, I go check it out. Absolutely blown away. It was beautiful stuff. I mean, it was certainly a compliment for Mike to say that we had a similar style, because you're a few years down the road more than I am, but it's amazing, beautiful. I love it all, and I'd love to learn more about you and how you create the images you do.
Well, thank you so much, man. Yeah, I'm happy to chat with you. Thank you. I mean, Mike's too kind. You're being too kind. I've looked at your work. It's stunning. And I love Kelowna. It's one of my favorite places in Canada. So
That's awesome.
I'm jealous of your location.
Well, LA is not too bad either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nah, yeah, 30 million people, after after a while, I'm like, it's all right.
Yeah,
It's all right.
Kelowna just hit 150,000 this year, so we've got a ways to go.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So you actually started in New York. You were an actor back in the day.
Yeah, so I moved to New York from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, which is close to Kelowna, when I was 22, and lived there for 10 years. Studied acting for film. Kind of had to figure out how to live in the city because it's an expensive city, and I, didn't have anybody really kind of paying the rent. So got into bartending, that kind of, and then I started building a photography business. I got every actor needs headshots. And so I got my headshots done by my good buddy, Ron Rinaldi, who was, the king of headshots in New York for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
And we became really good friends. And in fact, he's staying with me right now. He's in the next room. Yeah, we've been friends ever since our first session. And a lot of the reason why headshots look the way they do, including even mine, is because of him. So I always like to give him a little knock,
That's awesome.
It's important to acknowledge our influences. But yeah, we became really good friends, and I was kind of like, I'm bartending. What am I going to do with my life? I'm like 25, at this point. And so I bought a used camera off eBay, and I had kind of been into photography a little bit when I was a kid, but I just kind of decided to pick it back up, and bartending. A lot of actors in the industry work in the hospitality industry as well. And the bar gave me simultaneously headshot clients, but it also gave me my entire hotel photography, hospitality photography world, and in architecture came from a guy I met at a bar.
Oh, wow. Holy smokes.
Literally, I could boil it all down to one person.
That's amazing. Do you still keep in touch with that person?
Yeah, totally. We're still great friends. He is a GM with Marriott at the Marriott Waikiki Beach Resort and Spa. And yeah, there's a lot of turnover in the hospitality world. A lot of people move around. And so as he moved, he kind of introduced me to more and more people, and it kind of grew from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And do you shoot for him?
I haven't in a while. COVID kind of threw a loop. I went out there right before COVID and shot about 40 images. They'd just done a bunch of room renovations. They got this beautiful presidential suite there that looks right out, because the hotel itself is right off. There's like one main road between hotels and the ocean in Waikiki, and his sits like right on the edge of that. So
Nice.
A lot of the room views. In fact, there's one, I think it's the lead image on my webpage. And none of the views are photoshopped in and adjusted. They're all from that location. They were pen tooled in, but I didn't adjust. A lot of times I'll shoot views separately sometimes, so I can have a little flexibility in terms of what's there and what's not there.
Sure. I think I know that exact image. It's blue and white, the color.
Yeah.
Totally.
It's just kind of the ocean and the seating area. And the fun fact, the sailboat that's in that shot was not photoshopped in either. It was literally like right where it was for that
That's
frame. It was pretty incredible.
that's serendipitous. Yeah.
My favorite part's the sailboat, honestly.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. So, okay, so you're in New York, you're acting, you're doing headshots. You kind of
Yeah,
coined the cinematic headshot look. I mean, you're
I did.
known for that. What brought you from New York to LA?
Um, I was sick of winter. I mean, that's really it. It
Yeah.
was like I grown up in northern Idaho, 32, by the time I left Idaho at 22, I lived in New York till I was 32. And New York, oddly enough, has like really brutal winter.
Yeah.
Because in a way what I mean by that really is like, obviously it's nothing compared to like northern Canada, but it's how you experience it. Nobody's got a car, so you're walking in it, you're constantly in it, and it's a wet, damp, freezing cold. And there's kind of a funny thing in New York. There's no wind really until the wintertime. In the summertime, when it's hot and humid, you're just begging for like a 10-mile-an-hour gust,
Yeah.
and it never comes. But in the wintertime, it's like 30-mile-an-hour wind gusts up the city. It's freezing. And, my wife and I kind of felt like it was just time to have more. I wanted more flexibility and mobility on top of weather. It was like I wanted a car. I wanted to be able to go, out and see things and do things.
Hmm.
And New York was a fantastic experience. It literally gave me everything. And it's, I mean, one of the greatest cities in the world. I couldn't have imagined my life without that experience, but it was time to kind of move on. You sort of get into a zone. You need a lot of work ethic in New York, which is fine. I mean, I learned a lot of work ethic there and brought a lot of work ethic with me from my upbringing, but
Hmm. Yeah.
I just didn't want to. It's kind of, you work and you go out to eat and you go out to drink and maybe you see some shows, and after a while that kind of tends to be sort of the routine. And for a while that's great, but in the end I was kind of looking for more, I think.
Sure.
And so Los Angeles was kind of a logical next step just from a headshot point of view. I've got in-laws down in San Diego. And so we kind of approached it like that. In retrospect, San Diego's a much cooler town, but we like it. We found a place, and
And
we're able to buy. So
how did you find that from a business perspective? Like I always sort of find myself dreaming of, oh, I should move to this place or that place. But in a way, for me anyway, I feel like I'd be in some sense starting over. Like you've got to build a whole new
yeah,
clientele and
super stressful.
yeah.
I mean, it really is starting over. I mean, you're starting with a better portfolio,
Hmm.
a little bit of a name. There were some people that knew me in LA, but I was in some ways it was not wise to leave New York. I was kind of at a point in New York where I was getting a lot of headshot business from people who I'd never heard of.
Hmm.
And word was really building, word of mouth in New York. And so I kind of looked at it in terms of like, in 10 years, I could kind of see where I was going to end up with that. And it probably sounds a little egotistical, but like I kind of figured like, okay, I'm going to do really great at headshots for a while.
Hmm.
Might do, get into more hotel work, and there's plenty of hotels in New York, but it's kind of going to hit this point of like, that's sort of it.
Yeah.
And so, the decision to move to LA was super, intense. I mean, I cried when I left New York. I love that city. But moving to LA, you literally are just kind of starting fresh.
Yeah.
It was very slow for me for a long period of time.
Hmm.
I had to kind of code all my websites so that I would show up on Google. Like it's a major pain in the ass, really.
Sure.
Moving period is just a major pain in the ass. We're probably going to do it one more time, and then I don't want to have to do it again. Not with a business. So.
Oh, okay. Where are you thinking
yeah.
next?
Maybe Northern California, but
Okay.
we're going to be here for a little while.
Yeah.
But yeah, that'll be an easier move because at this point, so much stuff is kind of keyworded for California. I can fly and drive back and forth to Los Angeles. So it's less of a hardship. And then I've got, 5 or 6 or 7 more years worth of, Google stats to help that transition.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I might be wrong, but I imagine you're also probably in a bit of a place in your career where maybe not a lot of the work is local. You're probably traveling for a lot of the work anyway. So
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, a lot of I do pick up a fair amount of local work, especially with hotels. As I kind of mentioned before we started the meeting, like I just did a whole bunch of work for a Sheraton over by Disneyland. I've shot a couple of properties over there, so there's a lot of local work, but it's nothing that I can't very easily just drive down for
yeah,
or fly down for if I need to. So
yeah.
um,
Now, I was looking at your portfolio, of course, again, and what strikes me is sometimes you have people who do a whole bunch of different types of photography, and they're maybe okay in certain areas, but then they really excel in one particular area. But what strikes me about yours is you have kind of a varied set of genres, and yet they're exceptional in every single one. The aviation, the corporate headshots, the hospitality, the architecture, every one of them is super solid. Out of those, do you have a favorite to shoot?
Well, thank you for that. It's very sweet. I think personally, I'll answer your question in just one second. I think personally, it's very important to do a lot of different types of work. Um, for me, I've kind of always applied sort of similar lighting and theory to all of them. And so when you're trying something new, you kind of fall back on technique. You find a way to bring techniques that you already know to it, and then learn, hopefully stuff on top of that by doing it. But if I had to pick one, it'd probably be aviation.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I've kind of, it's on my website. I tend to think of websites as like fishing poles. Like I got a line in the water, to see if people bite. And I've done a couple other aviation things since that job, but not as much as I would like. I need to find a way to kind of push a little more in that direction. And it probably just involves, reaching out directly to some other companies. But that was a really fun shoot. The client was Clay Lacy Aviation, who is like they're like the 6th largest private jet company in the world. They do a lot of, they were the first company that proved a New York to LA and back possibility with when Learjet first came out. So this company goes back, I mean, they're legends in the aviation world. So when I got the call from them, they were like, we've seen your headshot stuff and we want some of that. We've seen your architecture stuff and we want some of that. We haven't really seen some of this kind of lifestyle ramp. They call it like FBO for fixed based operations. They call that FBO photography. And I was like, well, look, I'll come out. I'll take a look at everything. I'll give you an estimate. If the estimate falls within what you like, I'll come out for the first day and do a bunch of photography. If you don't like anything you see, then we can just call it quits. I won't charge you for anything. You can't use anything.
Wow.
But I wanted the job, and I was willing to prove to them I could capture what they needed. And I think within the first hour, they were like, okay, we're good. Like you can do this. So,
that's awesome. Good for you.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I would like to do more of it. I probably did. We shot over the course of like 3 days. And then I went back when their new kind of terminal or whatever, private terminal was finished, and I photographed that. And so there was kind of 3 phases to it over the course of about a year. And then, they basically have everything. They're building a new one down in John Wayne Airport. So I'm hoping I get to go shoot some stuff for that. But it was a lot of fun. But I think a lot of people get pigeonholed into thinking that you have to do one thing. I think you should learn to be really good at everything you do. And I'm not good at everything I've tried. I mean, I've tried wedding photography and I'm terrible at that. It's too fast for me.
Yeah.
the product I would like to try, I think, more of, but it's a little tedious for
Hmm.
my taste. Like food is about as much in that direction as I would probably go. I really like food photography.
Oh, there
That's
you go. Yeah.
yeah. It's interesting,
See,
and you get to eat things at the end of it sometimes. So
yeah, totally. It's usually a little cold by that point, but
yeah,
I think that one of the reasons that I love hospitality is because you kind of get that mix of food and
yeah,
lifestyle and architecture. It sort of
yeah,
encompasses all of it.
totally.
You made a description on your website that I really appreciated, that you get a chance to sort of slow it down and be a perfectionist and really pay attention to the details, and
Yeah,
I think you said something to the effect that the hospitality industry demands excellence. I
yeah.
thought that was a really good line. Yeah. And
Thank you. Yeah, it really does. It's and I try and deliver it, like I always kind of fall back to that common thing of like, I don't know how to do less than.
mhm,
And so when it comes to pricing and things like that, like I'll try and work with a lower tiered hotel who might not be whatever, a JW Marriott or a Disney Sheraton even.
yeah,
But they're ultimately going to get the same level of quality and images, because I don't want to ever half-ass my work for a price point. Like it
absolutely.
just doesn't, yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, for sure. Now, do you find that clients? Last month, I wrote an article for APA that was basically this sort of comparing. Do clients hire you for your unique style, or is it part of your job as a photographer to go to that client and adjust your style and adjust your technique to match their brand? Do you have a typical approach, or find that clients hire you for something?
I I don't know that I could put a like a I can't like pinpoint anything necessarily super specific. What I do think my clients really like is a lot of my guest room photography and a lot of my photography in general, provided the space is appropriate, is really bright and airy and clean. That's kind of, from what I've talked through with GMs and stuff like that, like they want, I sometimes get a lot of crap from proper architectural photographers because my beds are too perfect or my, whatever. And I'm like, well, tell that to the GM over here. Like I'll happily shoot a messy bed, but I just haven't found that client yet. Some of the boutique clients are willing to play with that a little bit. But in general, they don't want to see that. They want to see the best ideal of what their property is.
Absolutely.
And for them, that's cleanliness and perfection. And guest rooms are tricky to photograph in the sense that many of them photograph, as you well know, the raw images straight out of the camera are dark. You're basically photographing into a window at all times, and it's like there's only one window. And depending on various things in the room, kind of depends on that brightness. So helping that brightness along and kind of, getting it, in an idealized version, but still, within the confines of reality. I try not to make dark rooms and dark hotels look overly bright. But for the most part, that's tends to be the direction I go. But I don't think I think if a client likes your work, they will hire you. I don't think I need to adjust. I've never felt the need to adjust anything to my clients specific, to an idea of what their particular style or branding is.
Mhm.
A lot of the brands, the big brands like Marriott and Hilton and Hyatt, and they all have corporate standards for photography that they send out. It's like a 20-page thick PDF. And so any knowledgeable photographer will kind of read through it and go, okay, I don't shoot anything wider than 24 millimeters. They don't want too much distortion. They want, the space to be reflected accurately. There's some boring elements, like you can't put anything really into the rooms that isn't there. So I don't really play a lot with staging, except in certain situations where the property wants to shoot like a social media shot or something like that, where we can stage stuff and it's more of a limited use. situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I don't think anybody should. I think you should strive to create work that you're proud of, and somebody else will buy that confidence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Now, Mike actually said something to me that put in your portfolio what reflects the clients that you want to hire you. So I'm
he
guessing.
tells me the same thing.
Oh, okay. So,
yeah.
So based on your portfolio, my guess is you're probably not getting a lot of editorial style shoots where they want the messy bed because they're
Not really. I've been kind of asked if I can do it. I mean, there's in some respects there's a disconnect to what people are willing to pay and what they want. Obviously, we kind of all know that, I think, but um, you know, a messy bed is not necessarily easy to shoot. And I kind of tell people that sometimes too. It's not as simple as just like, let's jump in the bed and then shoot it. It's kind of like if we want it to look nice, we got to kind of, it's like I always tell people that the close-up detail shots take way more time than anybody thinks they do because there's so many more decisions that, move it this way an inch, move it that way an inch. Exactly. Does it go up? Does it go down? There's so many other variables. So, but yeah, in general, I don't get asked to do a ton of it. Hotels are starting to embrace lifestyle photography a little more. I think there's probably a little bit of a devaluing of the industry in that regard due to social media influencers mostly.
Sure.
They will go into a hotel property and say, trade me for a week's stay and I'll give you a bunch of content. And from a hotel's to a fault sometimes, maybe I try to think of my client and their point of view in business. Because if I'm always thinking about myself and my point of view in business, then I think it's a poor way to negotiate your business in general. You have to know where your client is coming from and what their mindset about something is in order to, first of all, value it to a point where they'll bite, that fish hook, but also not over, I don't really feel the need to nickel and dime my clients. I try not to, we can get into it later, but I have a rate sheet and I try to spell everything out and not make it overly complex, because I want to be, what I have found is that I want to be easy to work with. And sometimes that's to a fault, but I think in general, it's landed me more business than it has cost me money or time. If that was kind of a long tangent about.
I totally agree with you. For me personally, I'd say about 90% of my business comes from a referral. And, I think, you can be a good photographer, but if you're nice to work with, that takes you up to a whole other level. Yeah.
And if you understand what they're going through, shooting a hotel is a very complex operation to be done properly. Like there's so much more than just the photography that happens, that it's important to understand that, I'm utilizing their staff, I'm utilizing their time, I'm interrupting their spaces and their operations. So I try and keep a pretty low footprint. Most of the time I don't even need to bring an assistant. Shoots. Yeah, but I can basically handle most of all the stuff. And then, I think, sometimes there's times where I would like an assistant, and I do hire them for big shoots when I've got 2 this summer and I've got assistants for both of those because they're week-long, things. But most of my jobs are, a few days here, a few days there. Most of it I can handle. And then Cam Ranger, I think, has single-handedly put a lot of assistants out of business because it's replaced a human being.
And now, do you find that you have clients who, if you do quote including an assistant, that you get some pushback?
No. Most of my pricing will include an assistant on the rate sheet. Like I've kind of already priced that element if I need them, because I may only need an assistant for 1 or 2 days of a 4-day shoot. I don't need them the whole time. So I try to think of that when I'm doing the price sheet. And then, if I need to eat it, I eat a little bit of the cost and it just is what it is.
Gotcha.
I'm constantly reevaluating my pricing every year though. So um, I think that's kind of an important part of business too.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we'll get into that later. But what I'm really curious to know is just sort of, and I know it's going to depend on the style of shoot that you're doing and what the subject is. But can you kind of walk us through? Maybe start off with your gear and what you have in your
Sure.
kit, but then walk us through your process of how you shoot something.
Sure. Well, it starts off obviously with a lot of planning and emails. But I use a Nikon D850.
Mm-hmm.
I've been using it for I don't even know how long at this point. Um, Close to when it first came out. I've got a 24 millimeter tilt shift, a 19 millimeter tilt shift, which I hardly ever use. Even though I love it, I just wish it was 24. I wish Nikon would make an updated 24. Um, I also have a really older than me Nikon 35 millimeter tilt shift because I absolutely love the 35 millimeter focal length for architecture. I think it's more perfect than 24. The problem is you can't shoot rooms at 35 millimeters. But I literally do not shoot hardly anything wider than 24. So, and then I've got a 1.4 extender that I'll slap onto any of those to increase it. It's not on my website yet, but on my Instagram, there's a few recent shots from the Sheridan and the lobby shots, and I paired a 1.4 extender with my 35 millimeter for some of those. Wow. And the quality of the 35 is it's got issues because it's old, so there's a lot of chromatic aberration, but it's really sharp. It just kind of has a sort of maybe a touch, I don't know, I want to say grainy, but that's probably the wrong word. But I love the lens. I don't understand why a 35 millimeter tilt shift is not made.
Yes.
I have no idea.
Totally.
So that, and then I use for lighting, I typically use like Godox Flashpoint Explorer 600s. I got a couple of those. Mm-hmm. A lot of my lighting is bounce flash. So I don't even necessarily, like, I bring a couple umbrellas with me, like indirect, like a couple of like Photech soft lighters I have, and some other stuff, but I literally just walk around with a paint pole and like the Explorer 600 and we'll either bounce it off the ceiling or I'll do some direct stuff with like the frosted diffusion thing on the reflector, for some more point source. Basically, my I would say approach now when I look at a space is to keep it as and I think this has been a pursuit probably for most architectural photographers from beginning to end. And even Mike will probably tell you, because me and Mike are pretty good friends, and we've talked about it. He's got these beautiful homes that he shoots, and there's sometimes you get a crisis of too many compositions. What really are those great compositions? Yeah. In hotels, it's a little more like you should shoot these angles from here, and after you've been doing it a while, you kind of just know what those are. Going through the space and but you look for things. There's a lot of high ceilings, a lot of floor space, so you got to kind of find a way to balance those things out. But I think architectural photography is the pursuit of capturing a space as it is, and so adding light is something I need to do a lot more than like Mike does or some architectural photographers do, because the space just requires it. Like, you just have to do it. But I'm trying to do it with a lot more intention now than I used to when I kind of first started, making sure I'm not overlighting things. I find myself, desaturating things a lot more, just kind of finding a more natural look, and trying to keep it looking as natural. And I don't want to look at it and see flash. So I try and, balance because flash also brings kind of a cleanliness to hotel photography. I think a crispness that is not there with natural light, inherent mostly because of how the spaces are oriented and set up. it's literally like photographing in a cave sometimes. So you
Totally.
got to add light, and it's all about how you finesse that. And it's taken a long time to just kind of fine tune. And it's really through mistakes. At the end of every shoot, I kind of look through and I go, oh, I shot way too many flash pops of the space. Like I didn't need to do that. So,
Sure.
um, and then of course there's the post-production side, which, gets into it, but,
So
I don't use a ton of gear. So
no, it doesn't sound like it. Well, that's good. It's light and mobile, and I can see why you don't necessarily need an assistant. That's super handy. Do
yeah.
you usually start with a scout, being in LA, every drive is like an hour away, so you probably try to do the scout just before the shoot.
Sometimes I scout. A lot of time, but I'm also a lot of my clients are not in LA, so
Mhm.
I'm flying up, I'm shooting things, kind of sight unseen to a point. Um, the first time, what I'll do is usually fly in early,
Mhm.
and that first day is not a shooting day. I do a walkthrough of the hotel. We kind of look at all the areas that need to be shot. I talk through a whole bunch of specifics with the property about. They usually involve public spaces. The guest room part is kind of the easiest once that's handled.
Mhm.
So I tend to approach if I'm shooting, let's say for 4 days, I'll tend to stack all of the guest room stuff in the first couple of days because I just want to get in it. They need to be able to, I think about them. So it's like, if I can not tie up 8 or 9 of their rooms for the course of a week, that's better for them. And it gets me out of guest rooms because it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a long day. So
Yeah.
I try to knock those out and then move on to public spaces, meeting rooms, and all of those require a lot more logistical conversations where you need to have an opinion about a lot of things that people I don't think feel like they should or have a lot of opinion about. Things like the type of setup in the room, what the setup's going to look like on the tables, how's it oriented to the room,
Mhm.
what direction, what corner from the room I'm going to shoot, so I know what needs to be set on the tables. Meeting spaces are kind of the most boring thing that I shoot for hotels, but for them, it's one of their biggest revenue sources.
Yeah.
So,
And would you find that, like for meeting spaces, for example, have you kind of learned what works and what doesn't over the years, and you kind of go in with a
yeah.
preset idea, or is it more it's specific to each individual meeting room and what's happening in there?
It can be so. The hotel world has like a handful of setups that are traditional,
Mhm.
meaning they'll do a classroom setup where it's basically a bunch of long desks and pads and pens and everybody faces a screen and they have to capture these setups. But where we get to play with it a little bit is like, and one thing I push a lot is color contrast on the tables, making sure we're not putting white pads on white tablecloths with a bottle of water because everything just kind of disappears, So and some hotels are limited by their staff or by, things that they have on site. There's other hotels that partner with local vendors to come in and set up an entire, I do a lot of like mock receptions and weddings that they'll set up an entire ballroom like they're going to have a wedding just for me to photograph it. And so it's a very elaborate and intensive thing for them to have to deal with on their end because I don't really plan any of that. So we kind of go over colors that work and we try and stay away from like really neon bright electric colors. Pastels and earth tones and stuff like that tend to universally kind of appeal a little better and photograph better.
Sure.
You can always pump up saturation in some areas where, if you feel like it's a little too neutral after the fact. But I've come up with all kinds of little tricks. I also send a property a PDF of all these different things that we're kind of talking about. I say, I've got I developed last year, and I wish I had done it maybe 10 years ago, is I took a bunch of my guest room shots and I gave them a name. So that because one of the biggest problems when you're talking with a property and you're not at the location or you can't get to the location, even over Zoom, it doesn't really translate, is how to differentiate, because I sell packages images. I don't come for a day. So it's like you buy 30 images or you buy 45 images.
Okay.
And there isn't, everything I shoot on location is a deliverable. So it's not like I'm running around shooting a bunch of stuff and then I put up a gallery and they pick. It's
Right.
a terrible way to shoot a hotel. So it forces them to get specific, and the planning I think is better.
Yep.
But so I basically just kind of created a PDF with a bunch of different room shots, and I've gone, here's a hero shot, which is, the one everybody likes to see. It's from the doorway, looking at the bed. You got the window, you got the view, get a little bit of the TV, a little bit of the end tables, all that kind of stuff. And then I have another one called a reverse to room, which is from the window looking back into the room, and another one called a reverse to window, which is from the opposite corner of the door, looking at the television area. You get kind of the foot of the bed and then out towards the window, which is great for highlighting views and stuff like that. But what that did was allow me to communicate very clearly with a client in developing a shot list. So I send them a shot list template and this terminology PDF. Mm-hmm. And so I say, room number this is a king. You want 3 shots of it. One is a hero, one is a reverse to room, and one is a detail. And I give examples of details, or the bathroom, or whatever it is that they want to highlight. So getting them kind of on the same page communication wise, I've found to be like night and day in terms of making things easier, because otherwise they don't know what to call it. And if, they're like, we want 3 shots of the room, I don't know, but it kind of helps them visualize. So.
Absolutely. No, that's really good. I don't do that per se, but I do have a 2-page, I call my hotel checklist. And it's mostly about the fact that shooting or styling a hotel room is not, a housekeeping standard is not really acceptable. It's more of a photography standard. And so hammering that home, like ironing the bed sheets and stuffing the pillows if necessary to get them full and that sort of stuff. Yeah. Stuffing
the pillows. I've found, and this is where, because I also do the same thing. So within that, there's kind of I call it just a photography guide. It's a different PDF where it's just like, have housekeeping do these things, have maintenance do these things. Mm-hmm. And with housekeeping, especially now, there's staff shortages and COVID. And I basically tell them, I'm like, look, get it as best as you humanly can.
Yeah.
Do the best that you can. Yeah. I can deal with what I need to deal with in post-production. I don't want to be, that's an area that it can suck up way too much time. And some hotels take it to heart. They do a phenomenal job. And I've had hotels where I've showed up and been like, this sucks. And I call a housekeeper and we kind of adjust a few things. But at the end of the day, like, I'm just wasting time. Sure. And at that point, you weigh what's faster to fix on location and what's faster to fix in post-production. If it's faster on location, then I do it on location. If it's faster in post-production, then I do it in post-production. And I just kind of make a note anytime something irritates me of like, oh, that's a little thing we can tweak.
Totally, yeah. Update to the checklist.
yeah. Let me add that in. And there's just some things, I have, make sure that, the windows are cleaned and stuff before I get there. Cause sometimes they'll, I'll give them a shoot schedule and I'll say, okay, we're going to be in the lobby from 11 to 2. Yeah. And then there's somebody in there literally cleaning at, 10:45. And I'm like, okay, that's not how that should work either. So, but they got a big operation going, so like, I don't expect them. The biggest complaint I've had from clients is when they mention, not on me really, it's just a complaint about the process, when they've been like, oh, it's so nice working with you. The last guy we had was a total nightmare. And like, I literally have heard that more times than I can count. So if you're out there shooting hotels, understand that you're a small cog in the wheel of this thing, and try and accommodate them, like if it takes me an extra 20 minutes or 15 minutes in post-production to fix the corner of a bed that is literally going to take 20 minutes for a housekeeper to even get up to the room to deal with.
Sure.
Like, you just, learn to be agreeable, I guess.
So they're getting divas in there who need it perfect. Is that the sense you get? Or?
Well, I mean, let's be honest. The architectural photographers are kind of control freaks. I mean, I have dimmers on every light switch in my house for because I just want to have control over everything. So there's things I don't move on. Like if something really does, if I feel like something really needs to be shot at a certain time, I say something. But if I need to accommodate, I had to photograph it was like a rooftop bar for a hotel in San Diego, and they were okay with people in it, and shutting the bar down was just not an option. And shooting it at dawn was not an option because the staff is not available to set anything up. And so you got to make do, and if you push as hard as you can push, and then you do what you got to do.
Yeah.
So
okay, so I got to get your opinion on something. When you go into a hotel room and it looks kind of bland, whatever, do you throw the flowers on the table? Do you put the decorative pillows on the bed, the things that a guest would not see when they normally walk in, but you do it for the photo?
No,
you don't.
None of if you're shooting for a brand, none of that can be done.
Yeah.
The room really does need to look like it when it walks in the room. Presidential suites and higher end suites, sometimes you can get away with a couple of those little things. I'm really I hate flowers in a room. Mostly because I hate how everybody interprets flowers in a room. And when I say that, I mean, there's been a couple of times where we can get a small thing of flowers and put it in the room. And what I end up with is some fucking bouquet that is just, it's no, I want one flower in one tiny vase. I want to see one stem. It should be an elegant thing, not here's some flowers.
Right.
So, but in general, the brands won't allow that. It really does need to be stark, and even nowadays they're starting to pull things like room service books up, because if it changes, it dates the photograph. If a guest and I've heard stories about things that guests complain about, and if a guest walks into a room and where's my bouquet of roses, it's kind of that was just so. Now boutique properties that are not managed by a brand, you can get away with stuff like that. And some of them do that.
Sure.
I will stage as much as I possibly can. But in general, that's why you don't really need, in my opinion, for most situations, you don't necessarily need a stylist. If a stylist, I know what I want to see. What I typically need is a gopher. I need somebody to bring me this, get me that, help me move lights, help me move furniture. Sometimes in a hotel suite, if they're new, I've had a few hotels where the throw pillows haven't come in yet for the couch in the suite or whatever, so they'll go buy some.
Yeah.
But ultimately, they're going to be in the room. So
yeah.
Yeah.
No, for sure. I've gone into some hotel rooms. The client, they want to dress it up and they want to make it look pretty, but walk in and ends up looking like a funeral parlor or something with all the flowers everywhere.
Yeah. Just slow down on your flowers already.
It's a lot of flowers.
Put a bar in there. That'll sell people on it better.
Okay, so just to kind of recap your shooting process, it's usually just you. You've got a Godox at the end of a pole, and I'm guessing you've just got your Cam Ranger on an iPad, and you're going around popping, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm literally 5 seconds away from either dropping the iPad or the flash, one of the two.
Yeah, totally.
I do use a Pocket Wizard trigger because I've found that I hate the Cam Ranger app, and it's hard for me to hit the button with one hand and hold the light with the other. And I found I can kind of cradle the iPad in one hand and hold the button with the other.
Yeah.
And I've tried to have assistants do lighting for me, and that just feels like a slow process because I know exactly where I want it. And
yeah, totally.
So
you spend more time communicating what you want than actually just getting it sometimes.
Yeah. I'll use soft lighters and stuff like that if the ceilings are too high, or if I'm shooting food or cocktails, or if I need to really kind of fill a space with some indirect light, I'll use them. But in general, I've found the 600s to be pretty capable in most large situations. So
Yeah.
um,
For myself, I generally am working with an assistant, but for those shoots where I'm not, I actually found a really great little device off Amazon. It's like a vest that you put on, and it's got this flap, and the flap folds down, and your iPad sits in it right here, so your hands free. And
oh, that's kind of nice.
it is. It's made a big difference.
I might have to look into that.
Yeah, I'll send you the link.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've gone through the shooting. Now shoot's done. You get back home to the computer. What's your process?
I send it to somebody. No, that's true now. So I work with a gal up in Seattle. Her name's Jamie. She's amazing. Semblance Retouching is her. I'll give her a little plug, she does a phenomenal job. And I think like any team, it took a while to kind of fine tune our relationship on the post-production side, because for years, up until only within the last couple of years, I did all my own post-production. And then I realized that there's like life out the door.
Yeah.
And I got sick. I think I shot 3 hotels in 1 month. And then I spent the entire next month in front of the computer.
Yeah.
I really wanted to commit suicide at the end of it. So I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And so I've been sending my stuff out to Jamie, and what happens is like I ingest the images on my end into Lightroom. I go through and kind of do some general white balancing of things, and I select the images that I ultimately want to send to her. And then I upload DNGs for her. She does a lot of the heavy lifting involved in the exposure blending and the layering into the flashes and stuff like that. But then it's very much a team effort. Like she gets them about, I would say 90 to 98 sometimes % of the way there. But I find that even, and this is no, if she's watching, I love you, Jamie. It's no, she knows I'm kind of neurotic. So like, when it comes to my finished product. So like, there's just things that I see that nobody else does. And I see color in a way that nobody else does. My monitor is different than her monitor. So it's no real fault of anybody's, other than like, this is what it looks like to collaborate on post-production. And it's not perfect. You're never going to find somebody that you can just send your pictures to and have them come back without you giving them any notes and have everything be perfect. Like, I just don't, believe that's true. A little easier, I think, like, when you get to a point where you're just shooting all natural light, Mike, I think, shoots mostly natural light. His guy's kind of dialed in that he uses for post-production, and then Mike, of course, puts his touch on it. But I think, as we know, that you can wash 90% of a car, but that last 10% of polishing adds a lot to it as well. So, I think it's important for photographers to share their credit with people, and retouchers often don't get the credit they deserve, in my opinion. So yeah, Jamie does a lot of my really heavy lifting. She sends them back to me. I will often go back and do, even more refined color work, even more refined saturation stuff. Sometimes I ask her to do something, and then I get it back and I decided I was wrong, and I fix it, because I'm not going to send it back to her and make her pay for my mistake. So, it's a collaborative effort. And so nowadays it's a shared thing, but for, a long time I did it myself. And I still do some, when I get bigger shoots, a lot of times there's, she's going to hate me, but like, I'll send her like a bunch of the stuff I don't really want to do. And then I'll pick like the lobby shots. So like, I've been trying to send her some of those, because she jokingly complains to me of like, oh, you hoard these for yourself, and I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you there. So,
well, that's pretty good that you're willing to give that up. I mean, certainly, like you said it yourself, a lot of architectural photographers, they like to keep control. And so to sort of hand that over and be able, not only to be able to delegate, because that's a tricky thing to do, but to trust somebody enough that, I mean, it's especially nowadays in the control and the power that you have in post over your final images is pretty heavy.
It's huge. I mean, I feel like this is, and in some ways, I've been doing hotels long enough that there's a part of it that's sort of really lost its kind of, unless I'm shooting a really cool new space or something, like it's kind of, and thankfully a lot of hotels lately have been renovating. So there's a lot of cool renovations happening, which is visually very interesting and fun to shoot. But yeah, it is hard to let go of control, especially within post-production, but ultimately I still put enough of my touch on it that I can still call it mine. Look, sometimes I'm undoing things that she's done that, I want a little, we just have, you got to find that creative blend, and I don't knock her for it and she doesn't knock me for it. It's just the collaborative effort of how things are done. Mm-hmm. She'll send me an image. I might give her some notes. And then, anything beyond that, I kind of decide I'll deal with on my end. Mm-hmm. I tend to still I still drop in most of the guest room views for my shots and do some of the final balancing between the view and the interior, because I feel like that's such a subjective thing. And I've got a very picky sense of what is acceptable in that regard. Because I think, if you're going to Photoshop views in, it can get really fake really fast. And this is just looking back at my own work 10 years ago, realizing the mistakes I made then versus the evolution of my post-production work now. But if it took me a week or 2 weeks to finish a job, that same amount of images I can do in, a few days now, which is, that gives me a lot of time in my life back.
Wow.
I get to go take my dog out and, work on getting other jobs and other, it's just a better use of time, I think.
Yeah.
But I definitely put enough on the back end that they're still mine in post-production, but they're also hers. And it's a reflection of us both. It's a team effort.
So you obviously feel that cost is worth it to you. Without getting into specifics, is it quite a costly process to send as much work as you do?
It's affordable. She, and I'm kind of a legacy client, so she doesn't mess with me too much. And in fact, in some respects, in some situations, I've paid her more because I feel like she did more, and so I pay her more than what she asked for. It's affordable, and yeah, if it gets too much, then I'll say something and she'll be receptive to it. But realistically, for what she does, it's an affordable price point. Yeah. It's worth, most of my retouching jobs are 15 to 30, maybe 45 images. The two that I've got coming up this summer are going to be 65, 75 images or so a piece. Wow. And so I'm going to take, whatever, 10 or 20 of those and send her the rest. I'll send her some good ones. But I try and kind of share off the workload, partly in costs, I just kind of take it case by case, but it pays to not be greedy with the profit margin. It's kind of like, I'd rather, what is that amount of time in my life worth is kind of how I weigh it.
Sure. So, and is that something that you're sort of upfront with your clients about? Do you tell them I'm hiring this professional retoucher and I have to bill you separately for that? Or do you just eat it within your own cost? How do you do that?
No, it's rolled into my pricing. My client doesn't need a say in who I use as a retoucher. They don't need a say in my back end workflow, as long as the finished product is right. And any corrections a client asks for, I handle personally. Okay. And nothing goes to my client without coming through me, and I put my own little polish on it myself. Sometimes it's very minimal, and sometimes it's more extensive. It just depends. Mm-hmm. Guest rooms, views, stuff like that. I put a lot more work into. Sometimes I'll shoot a pool shot and send it to Jamie and she just nails it. Sometimes I add a little bit of contrast or whatever, and
Sure.
send it off. So it kind of weighs itself out. But ultimately, yeah, my pricing includes retouching, and it's enough to cover that cost. And then again, reevaluate every year and make sure you're in the zone, in the ballpark.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's great. Now you mentioned that you do packages.
Yeah.
So maybe you can talk a little bit about how that. I mean, you've kind of got
Totally.
day rates and hourly rates, but you're doing something different.
Yeah, I do have a day rate. I've got a day rate range like most photographers do that tends to cover abnormal requests or maybe commercial architecture a lot of times will fall under, so I charge two different ways. So let's say it's corporate architecture or something like that, like photographing an office building or something, or even the Clay Lacey job, the aviation job. Excuse me. I will typically I'll give them an estimate for a final cost, and that'll be typically based off of a day rate, somewhere between $2,500 and $3,500 a day. And then there's a per image fee tacked onto that, which typically covers post-production and, licensing and markup and whatever. And that's usually how I bid anything but a hotel. And occasionally I've had a hotel be like, listen, can you come out for the day? We don't know what we want. We just want, a mix of food and this and that and the other thing. And so, we kind of go by that. But with hotels, what I've found is packages over the years, I've kind of hammered out the amount of images that most people want or need to cover a certain amount of things. So my lowest package is 15 images. The next step up is 30, then 45, then 65.
Okay.
And as you can imagine, the 15 image package is called a mini shoot. And then from there, it goes up to like a half shoot and a 3/4 shoot and a full shoot. And that kind of, the two I'm doing later this year, those are full shoot packages. And I'm also adding video to that. But it gives them a comprehensive idea of, and they can use the 15 images however they want. But sometimes like a hotel will want, hey, can you come up? We renovated our meeting spaces, or our meeting space photos are out of date. We need 15 shots. Like I was getting that request a lot. Between 10 and 15 images seems to be like this number that everybody gets in their head. And so I created a package for it. And then what I've done is I charge once they've signed a contract and they are within a package, so they buy a 30 image package, it's under contract. We get to the property and they want to add 5 images. I've got a line item within, that calls it out in the rate sheet and on the final estimate and contract they send that says any additional images on location are billed at, I think I give them a deal. It's like $175 an image. I'm already there. You want to add a couple images. I'm not going to take you to the woodshed over it. So I'll give them on the rate sheet. It's like a menu, right? On the rate sheet, I give them the package price, how many images it includes, what it doesn't include, like airfare, travel, accommodations, and meals on site. It's very typical for hotels to put up a photographer and feed them. So I don't pay for food and I don't, pay for rooms or anything. Yeah. But then, that price will then be, like, let's say it's whatever, $9,000. I'll break that down as like, it works out to X amount per image so that they can look at it and go, what do I want to spend that image on? And then I've started doing things like I'll do a la carte options. So if they want headshots, if they want food or cocktails, if they want social media shots, like close-ups of like charcuterie on a bed or something, we make a separate list of that. And then I encourage them to charge those things separately.
Right.
Because, if if they want, burn one of their architectural images, but it's going to be, a $300 image for charcuterie on the bed. So you can either use that towards an architectural shot, or you can tack on, some a la carte options where it's, I want 5 social media shots, I want 5 food dishes, and we have 5 people that need headshots. And then it turns, it lets them kind of decide how much they want to, how much money they want to spend. They're kind of in control of that.
Yeah.
To a certain point.
So ultimately, you've got basically a per shot rate sheet, and then it scales based on with the quantity that they're going for.
Yeah, exactly. But I only give them the options packages. Sure. It's either 15, like I don't want to work for less than what my 15 image package price is.
Yeah.
I could even, let me pull it up and I'll just, because everybody always wants to know prices. I mean, the thing is like when I think about pricing, it's taken me, I don't know, way too long probably to figure this out. And now it's also important to understand that my prices will scale depending on the client. That 165 image shoot for a JW Marriott or the Beverly Hills Hotel or some really high-end luxury property is going to cost more than your average airport Hilton hotel. It's the same amount of images, same quality of work, but there's a lot more, and they understand that, as most people do, because it's kind of like, when you stay at a nice hotel, you're still getting a hotel room in both cases, but it's location, it's service, it's whatever. When it comes to a JW Marriott, there's a lot more things that have to be dealt with on my end. And to be clear, I've not even shot a JW Marriott, but I just know that like pricing has to scale with the level of client that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
But it doesn't scale down. I guess that's probably the most important part of that.
And then how do you deal with, and this maybe doesn't apply too much to hotels and hospitality, but for other things, third-party use. The builder wants to use the architect's photos and such.
That's so within my contract, I have a whole paragraph about that. And that is basically that because I've been shooting a lot of renovations, if a property wants to, or if a vendor wants to license images from the hotel shoot, they can, provided it's okay with the property. Mm-hmm. So I kind of give the property some control in that regard, because I think it's a nice thing to do. If they don't want their images given to a contractor, I will honor that. Yeah. And so basically they have to go through the hotel to get my information, and then it's based off of a per image rate, usually somewhere in the $300 to $500 an image range, because they never want very many. They might want 5 or 6. The architect might want some. I don't do it nearly as often as I would like to, but it is it does happen occasionally. Yeah, and it's handled mostly that way. So.
For me, I was finding that, a lot of clients, they didn't have a lot of incentive to say, yes, we'll share our images that we paid for. So what I found was I started doing basically a percentage kickback of the licensing goes back to that original client to help them offset their production costs. And I find that actually really helps them to say yes.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. I might have to implement something similar, because they don't. Sometimes a client will not, a hotel client especially, does not necessarily, the communication with the general contractor, the architect, is not always seamless. So, and you probably know this, but within the hotel world, there's various levels of organization. And I think if we're going to talk about, because there's probably people that will watch this and want to know, how do I get into shooting hotels? Like, I get that question all the time. Mm-hmm. Some of that is right place, right time, but it's important to know that, like, just because a photographer says, oh, I shot a Marriott today, or, I hear this one kind of off the side a lot, where it's like, oh, I shot for Marriott today. And it's like, probably not. Marriott, only owns and manages, I think, or operates like 1% or less of the properties that have a Marriott name. It's a franchise.
Yes.
So there's typical hotel ownerships, and sometimes a hotel is owned by one person, sometimes it's owned by a hedge fund, sometimes it's owned by a large real estate development conglomerate. It varies. And then sometimes that hotel, oftentimes, is managed by another company entirely separately that has to clear things like, photo shoots and the cost of that from an ownership group. Hotels pay to use the Hilton name or the Marriott name or the Hyatt name. So just because I shot a Marriott does not mean I was shooting for Marriott. And if I was shooting for Marriott, my hotel rates would climb threefold, because at that point it's a different, the usage is different. And so a lot of people don't realize that. They think, oh, I'm shooting this Marriott and wherever, or this Hilton and wherever. And, it's a franchise. You got enough money, you can buy one too, So, but it helps understand the organizational structure too, because not everybody makes the decisions with regards to licensing. The ownership group is going to be the one in charge of the renovation. They're going to be the ones talking to the contractor. And sometimes the ownership group only sees the images after the fact and goes, okay, cool. They may not even see the contract, the management company might, or in retrospect, maybe somebody at the ownership group sees it, but it's not, So I definitely will take your idea to heart, because there might be a way to kind of like incentivize, that situation.
Yeah.
My dog.
Yeah.
She wanted, hold on. I got to let her out real quick.
Oh yeah. I'm realizing that anyone watching this isn't seeing what I'm seeing right now. And right behind me, there's a tiny little cat door that cats and dogs, you've got a whole animal farm there, have been coming and going the whole time. I'm sorry if I'm not like watching you. I'm watching the animals coming and going.
No, I know, right? They're way more interesting than me. Yeah. I mean, I tend to like dogs over people anyways.
So. Yeah. I think most people do.
Yeah, she was in here with me sleeping for a while. I didn't have the heart to move her.
Yeah, no, that's cute. Yeah. Now, you already mentioned that you do contracts. So is it an extensive one? Do you keep it pretty simple?
Let's see. I think it's like, I think it might be like 5 pages. It's simpler than it looks. Basically, once they've kind of picked a package off the rate sheet, and I just had that up. Hang on.
So you're pretty much 15 shots a day.
Somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah.
And these prices, it works down. Yeah, this is, these might actually be for, well, whatever. They might be for, because I kind of have several different versions of this rate sheet. One is like recurring clients, which pay just a little bit less, which is what I think this is. And then you can go up from there, like, I think it's really important to have, like, I've got the exact same rate sheet, but it just says like luxury hotel, VIP, and kind of everyday, and I have 3 different versions. So these can kind of scale according to whatever those needs might be. And after this year, I'm probably going to reevaluate some of the higher end packages and some of the lower end ones as well. But my full hotel shoot is $14,000. Works out to about $215 an image. That might be a touch on the low side, but I've also heard pretty honest feedback from clients that I'm kind of in the middle. So, and that's, there's a lot of work right in the middle.
Yeah.
It doesn't make them feel like they're paying out the nose, and it doesn't, I don't like undercutting anybody. So if you got a problem with my pricing, you can email me. We'll chat about it. It's been working well though. So
I'm not surprised. I mean, if you find that you're kind of middle of the range pricing and you're delivering the quality of images that you clearly have, I think from a client perspective, that's great value.
Yeah, I'm probably too good a value. At a certain point, I gotta probably kick it up a couple of notches for some people, and I tend to do that. I think we all have our legacy clients where it's like we start with one of my hotel clients I've had for 10 years, and I've raised the rates on them pretty consistently.
Mm-hmm.
But at a certain point, I just don't. I'm okay. We have a great working relationship. The money's fine. I'm not necessarily rolling in it on every job. But I tend to make up for that, with new clients on jobs where my value is still higher, and it all works out.
Yeah.
But it's in terms of like my contract, it's let's see, hotel quote. It is probably 5 pages. I think the first couple of pages work out to be a kind of summary of what everything is going to be.
Yeah.
It's opening right now because they're Word documents, but and then there's like 2.5 pages of like legal, where it just kind of talks about what they're going to get, what the rights usage are, so my estimate, I have the date, I have the client name, I have the shoot date, job description, which kind of outlines whatever package they decided to provide. And sometimes like this particular estimate was based off of a day rate because they didn't even want 15 images. So then I go down to like, you're just going to pay a flat rate for the images that you do want, but it's still a defined amount. I don't ever let anybody just come out and shoot and give me a gallery, because that's just not a wise use of my time. So there's 2 pages. I try to keep it. 2 pages are the outline of the shoot, outline of fees, any travel fees, my line about additional architectural images if requested by client are X amount, not included in the estimate, anything that isn't included. And then terms and conditions for the last 2.5 pages.
How do you handle deposits?
Yes, 50% invoiced as soon as the contract's signed.
Right.
I did not take deposits for a long time, and it never screwed me in terms of like people backing out or whatever. But it did cause massive fluctuations within my income. So I was sort of able to stabilize the slow times by taking deposits. Like I've already taken 50% deposits on my 2 largest shoots that are happening in like August and September. But I took those months ago. So it keeps us all, this is kind of preaching to the choir with the APA community, but contracts are part of the thing. Deposits, you absolutely should take them. It will make your spouse happy. So there's just kind of, there's sort of, I still have slow months where maybe I'm not doing anything, but there's, I'm not quite as busy as Mike. But it is, I'm as busy as, I like to be.
And when you have to do travel shoots, do you like to book your own flights and maybe hotels, whatever, so that you get those credit card points, or do you want the client to deal with that?
Yeah. I handle all travel arrangements. Obviously, if I'm shooting the hotel I'm staying at, then they handle, that end of it. So I don't get points for that, but that's okay. The flight points are kind of more important to me anyway.
Sure.
But yeah, then any other commercial jobs, like I've done some commercial architecture work for like TKE elevators, and I've flown to various different elevator and escalator installations around the country and shot some of those. And those are always like, I just bill for the hotel as an actual cost. I give them an estimate about what it'll cost and then send them a receipt for the final amount after the job's complete. But even them, they initially didn't want to agree to a 30-day payment window. And I was just like, well, that's what all my other clients do. And, unless there's some really exceptional reason why you can't cut a check in 30 days, I don't know what the problem is. So they ended up being okay with it. And I think, so much of running your own business is working with confidence, whether you know what you're doing or not.
Baffle
I
them with
think,
bullshit.
yeah. To a point, it's just like, and maybe it's just because like I'm older and I'm getting more gray hair, but like I kind of just don't give a shit. I'm like, my deal's 30 days.
Sure.
Like, just be on board with that. And if it gets a little, late, it's, I'm not calling the collector Vinny down at the corner and having him,
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
I find for myself, the first one is a friendly reminder, and then they get
yeah,
less and less friendly as time goes on. But
sure,
yeah,
sure. Thankfully, I don't have too many issues in that regard. Most of my invoices get paid in a pretty timely fashion, and taking deposits eliminates the pressure. It used to be, it's like I do a big job, there'd be all this time invested, and then, I'm waiting and waiting to get paid, and it's just like, so deposits are, and nobody blinks. I have not had a single client complain about having to pay a non-refundable 50% deposit.
totally.
It's not in anybody's best interest to screw anybody over in that situation. So,
Okay, so that brings up a question. You collect your
Sure.
50% deposit, and a hotel flies you off to New York for a one night shoot, and the weather is absolutely terrible, and it's an exterior. How do you handle that?
well, if in that situation, I don't typically fly anywhere for less than a couple of days.
Okay.
And so, and I probably should do this, and I'll probably get yelled at by the AP community for doing this, but I don't typically, with my so many of my hotel clients I've had for a long time, that to me, getting the job done right is more important than the time to an extent. And let me try and explain what that means before, because like I can already hear the internet yelling at me. If I'm there to shoot 10 images or 15 images, it's a 1 day shoot. I'm going to allow a day to fly in and not shoot, because I don't want to shoot after I've been flying. I want to look around the property, settle in, see what the light's doing, and see, if it's somewhere, especially if it's somewhere I haven't been. And then I'll get up the next day, we'll shoot all day. And then I usually plan a backup day, and flights are cheap to reschedule these days. On top of that, in fact, most, like United doesn't even charge me to change flights. So I fly United a lot. So I kind of just do that because I feel like it's the right thing to do. You're paying me enough money to allot for that amount of time. I don't charge a quote unquote travel day. My expenses are handled. I don't pay for anything out of pocket really. My flights are handled on the back end. So it's just kind of like, I'm not paying for food at their property. Like, what's the worst that can happen? I have an extra day on location to sit and enjoy the city. Because one thing you'll know if you travel and photograph hotels a lot is it sounds really luxurious to be like, oh, I went to Hawaii and shot this Marriott for 3 days. I didn't leave the hotel until the last day.
Yeah.
I looked out my window and sat on a balcony and had a nice view, but like I didn't go experience Hawaii or anything. It's like, so I try and weigh it out. Now, there are situations where I do charge travel days, or I charge, driving time, or, stuff like that. So I try and charge for my time as much as I need to, but sometimes it feels like nickel and diming people. Like, I'm making enough money that it's fine. And if I'm not, then I need to reevaluate my own pricing. Whether I charge $5,000 and then a $500 per day travel day, it depends on the job.
Sure.
It really depends on the job. Most of my clients are reoccurring clients, and it's just not something I feel compelled to do.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. And so you've booked your own flights. Do you just get free cancellation insurance or whatever? So
no, and maybe it's a U.S. thing, but like a lot of the airline policies since COVID have just been like, if you need to reschedule a flight, as long as you do it within 24 hours, they won't charge you for it. So if I get to a location and the weather is absolutely terrible, Then I'll hope for the best on my backup day. And if that doesn't work, then I kind of go to the client and say, look, it is what it is.
Yeah.
I'll try and get you a new sky. If it's too moody and too dark, I love so much moody architectural photography, but it just doesn't always fly with hotels.
Sure.
So, I'll do what I can, but, I'm not going to stay an extra thing. Then we start talking about money. Like if I give you an allotted amount of time for this 1 day shoot, but very rarely does that, I don't think I've ever even encountered that as being a problem.
Okay.
I typically try and schedule these shoots at times of year where, you got to be aware of all these things when you book the shoot to begin with too. If like I photographed a hotel in Washington, DC last year, and it was like I started it before the pandemic, then the pandemic hit and I had to go back. And I was like, look, if you want me to shoot this pool in December, like I just don't think you should do that. Like it's worth waiting, like you gotta be assertive enough to use your expertise in the field to go, spring is a better time for this, or fall is a better time for that. And I always sell it. It's salesmanship, you have to sell your client on the time of year that you want to shoot, when you want to shoot it, and hope that it aligns with them. And then you hear feedback from them about what's going to work for them, and you find a middle ground and, compromise. So I try to avoid the possibility of that ever happening. But if it does, there's tricks.
Yep. Okay.
We'll shoot the room brighter. We'll drop in a view.
Sky replacement. Whatever.
Yeah, if I need to. I've always thought about it if that ever happened, what I would do. And I would probably, if I had to leave, I would probably find somebody local to go take a high res shot of the view, because the room itself, I can shoot when it's cloudy. I can shoot, I just lean a little more on flash, but it's still doable. So,
sure.
It's funny. I think with photography, especially architectural, I feel like we've gotten to the point where we can sort of edit our way out of any problem we encounter. And I don't really know that that's kind of takes the fun out of it for me a little bit. Cause there's something really gratifying about getting things right on location.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. There are days when I miss the film days, but mostly I don't. It's yeah.
I shot film like as a kid for the fun of it, but like I could not imagine trying to run a business shooting film. Yeah, like the guys that did hotel photography with film. Yeah. Like it's just, and it's much slower process. That's why it was also more expensive then too, for that reason, shoots back in the day, and some people are still commanding these rates, and I'd love to get up into that echelon. I just find that clients don't. Like I've bid $35,000-$40,000 for hotel shoots, and I just don't land them that much. I think that, to a point, the market's getting a little devalued, and there's a lot of content creators and people that say they can do it. There's also a lot of really terrible hotel photography. Yeah. So you got to compete with that too. But
so do you find that the hotels simply aren't paying that much, or they're just
no. I think that they will pay it. It's just that I have not personally encountered that situation yet. Right. I'm probably now, over the course of time, I've collected in that ballpark from clients over the course of a year or 2 years as they're renovating and doing multiple shoots. Yeah. Adding other services helps, like I add video now, and and lifestyle shoots can add even more. I've climbed into the $30,000 estimates, but it's something that I think people want to take more in chunks, spread out over a year or two.
Sure.
Or, a couple of years probably. In which case, to me, it doesn't. I'd rather have consistent work than, but then again, there's something to be like, it would be great to just shoot 10 projects a year at $50,000 a piece or whatever. That'd be amazing. Yeah. And I think it also depends on who you're shooting for. There's a lot of really phenomenal hotel and architectural photographers. Brandon Barr does really beautiful, amazing hotel work. our styles are obviously very different, but I believe kind of on the same level. But he also shoots for just in terms of like he shoots crazy amazing. When I said on the same level, I really just meant like from a quality of image post production standpoint. But his so much of that is location. I mean, he shoots some crazy,
Oh yeah,
awesome,
Ritz
you know, and
Carlton.
yeah,
Yeah,
but he's also those are locations that at least in terms of and I'd love to chat with him because I love his work, but um, from looking at it from like a social media or third party standpoint, he's mentioning architects and designers and interior designers, especially. I think he's being commissioned a lot more by interior designers and architects who are willing to pay more, and the usage is broader. It's getting publicized. There's more money involved, and I would not hesitate to write estimates for that same level of financing, given the usage is the same. I've done it. I've bid on a Marriott job for Marriott corporate, that was in that echelon of, $35,000, $45,000. And they went with somebody else, which is fine.
yeah,
But yeah, it's really about, I think, who you're shooting for. If you're shooting for an owner operator of a airport Hilton, as we've already established, one of my clients is a hotel corporation and the whole thing is owned by one guy. So that one guy is trying to, if I'm looking at it from my client's point of view, that one guy is trying to collectively make his properties a success. He needs to watch his wallet. He's not going to be spending $30,000 for a shoot, but he will over a couple of years.
Sure.
No question. Yeah. He'll do, like this phase, they built 2 buildings. It's a new construction, one in Seattle and one in San Francisco. I'm shooting both. They're beautiful properties, and we're going to do full architectural shoots on both of them. We're going to do some video for both of them. And then 3 or 4 months from now, I'll probably do some model lifestyle shoot for them. In another year, there might be some more stuff, so it's like it's just a longer time frame. So it works for me though.
No, for sure. Good. I know you have the gym to get to, so I've just got a couple more questions I want to run by you.
I'm good. I think I'm going to bail on it today anyway. So.
Okay. I was just curious to know if you can recall off the top of your head what the most challenging shoot experience is that you've had in your career so far.
Oh man. Sure. I typically find the more challenging shoots were shoots where the tier of hotel was something maybe lower than what I normally shoot. Mm-hmm. And that's not I hate to put it like that because it's like everybody needs good imagery, I think. Just because you're a Hilton Garden Inn or a Motel 6 doesn't mean you can't strive for the best. You just got to be willing to pay for it. And I found a couple of situations where they were willing to pay for it. And so I went and shot them. But the staff, so much of a good hotel shoot relies on staff when you're shooting for the hotel itself. And if there isn't the staff or there isn't the housekeeping or isn't, and sometimes it's not anybody's fault. It's really just
their standard.
The amount of people available to devote their time to this. And, you end up with results where the beds are a nightmare or you walk in the room, it's much harder to photograph a space that is not aesthetically beautiful and make it look good than it is to photograph a beautiful space.
Absolutely.
So much of the new renovations that I'm shooting, it's much easier to shoot.
Yeah.
They're beautiful. It's they're thoughtfully done. The lighting's nice. The walls are white. There's so many, things. But if you walk into a hotel and the walls are yellow and you're fighting against old furniture and old carpet, and then clients who are demanding that things look amazing and perfect. It's stressful. I don't know that I could point I've not had a lot of just like got home and went, well, that was a total nightmare.
Sure.
There's always a few elements of every shoot that are like, fuck, that was way harder than I wanted it to be. I mean, hell, I shot an exterior for a Sheraton over by Disney last night, and in some respects, it was a total nightmare. Um, I couldn't really shoot it at dawn. Maybe I could have. No, we were trying to get we're putting Disney lights off fireworks. So they have an old shot with fireworks behind the hotel that they wanted. And so I was like, well, I'll kill two birds with one stone and shoot the hotel and then go up to the roof and shoot the fireworks. And then I'll be able to use some of those fireworks for the final shot. Sure. But I mean, 8 o'clock at night, everybody and their brother is coming back from Disneyland. It's just people and cars and oh, we can't find the keys to this car and we can't, and even though in my, like there's a part of me that's like in my head, it's like, okay, we've had this down for a week, there should have been a plan, but it's not the property's fault, that somebody just rolled up when somebody wasn't looking and left their car there for the entire night. Now I got to cover it with a bush, it's just like, yeah. So Murphy's Law is real strong in my world, mm-hmm. where, the minute I set the camera down, everything will be perfect. And then that's when all the pandemonium hits and I got to ride it out, like a surfboard. So,
totally.
That's, it's stuff like that. There's always those things. There's always a wall where I want to stand. There's always I've spent an hour straightening a lobby to have a pile of kids come in and mess it up in 5 minutes. It's just like,
yeah. Isn't that the truth though about the wall? Like no matter what, you always want to be where that wall is.
Always a wall. Always a wall. Always a pillar. Yeah. There's always a window. Yeah. It's like I don't understand. It's like they make these things so with photographers in mind. But that's the nature of this. It'll teach you patience.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why I kind of liked aviation was it was like all the beauty of architecture without all of the, like it's a much more controlled environment. You want a plane move, boom, there's a guy there to move it. You want this done, boom, there's a guy there to move, so it's like, you're not worried about a lot of other things. And hotels, a lot of people, I've fielded a lot of conversations where it's just been like, how do I get into hotels? I just think it's so amazing what you're doing. It's like, it's great. It really is. It's a niche market and you can really turn out some beautiful work in it. It's just like anything. It's not always what it's cracked up to be.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, for sure.
And the post-production level is insane. Like, there's things sometimes where it's just like, why can't we just all be happy with, less work, less post-production, but
yeah, no, and it's funny, you put into words something that I think I've intuitively thought, but I've never really been able to say is that I think that's a big difference between hotel photography and say architectural photography is that with hotel, you've got what you've got. And in many cases you have to shoot it the way that it's presented. And so that relies on hotel staff a lot. Whereas architecture, you can kind of move the furniture and set deck and style it and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, you have a little more control in that sense. And yeah. It's an interesting distinction between the two.
Yeah, I kind of think of hotel photography, at least the way I like to approach it is like, and I don't want to say the word real estate, and it's nothing against real estate photography. It's really just the approach of like, hotel is probably a combination of real estate and architecture, higher end, and I try and stay on the more architecture side of that. Mm-hmm. I do stage things. I still move furniture. There's a lot of decisions, like I said, with the meeting space stuff, you need to be prepared to have an opinion.
Sure.
And it's, some photographers are just like, do whatever you want to do. I don't care. I'm going to set down the tripod and shoot whatever you want to shoot. And I just can't, like, inside, I'm like we really should put some, for example, like I did a shoot for a property and they set it up with like rounds in a meeting space and they were going to put, a white pad on like maybe a cream colored tablecloth and some water, and like it just kind of looked, and they were like, what do you think? And I was like, I was like, I think we could do better, but this is what you guys want. Because sometimes it's important to sell a very basic setup too. So like I've had to shoot things where I'm just like, I don't really, I don't get it, but whatever you want. But in this situation, they were like, well, what would you do? And I was like, well, do you have placemats at your restaurant? And they're like, yeah. I was like, what do they look like? They're like, oh, they're these kind of black weave, kind of cool looking, got some texture. I was like, great, get me 40 of those.
Right.
And we'll put them between the pad and the pen and the placemat. And then we set one table, and I'm like, now look at how much, and immediately it's like a light bulb goes off.
Totally.
They just because they're, used to setting things a certain way every time, they're not always thinking of those type of things.
Yeah.
I've had properties not have placemats, and they've had construction paper in the back. And we've literally used construction because in the photograph, you can't tell. Sure. It's just a pop of color under that thing to dress it up a little bit. So I find I'm constantly pushing, more color, more contrast on the tables. Yep. Up lighting is a big thing. I've been trying to convince a lot of properties to buy their own up lighting because I'm like, you can get them on Amazon nowadays cheap. Like, just get it. It's great. It can make any room look like a party. When people come in and they're using their cell phones and they're hashtagging the hotels, you've got more light. The cell phone pictures are better. Like, and it helps them kind of think of their own property in a way of like, what can we do to not only make our images better for you, but for for the client or whoever's using it. So
absolutely. Yeah. You just need to open up your own little placemat company and sell
I know.
in the shop.
Hotel props, but it's, it's colors, it's all that kind of stuff, but, and so in that regard, you can have fun with it like architecture, but you are confined to, the given, in most guest rooms, there's only a few good angles. There's not a plethora of like, oh my God, there's so many compositions,
Totally.
Occasionally. And it's usually in like the lobby or the bar or something like that. So,
yeah. And in those cases, do you find that you typically shooting in the middle of the night, or do you have hotel staff actually cordoning off those areas? So you're
it depends. It depends on what the look is. Most restaurants I tend to like, unless it's, unless we're talking like Brandon bar level sexy bar in some swanky hotel in Vegas or something. In general, I typically like to shoot restaurants during the day and bars at night.
Sure.
Sometimes that's not always the case. Sometimes I'll shoot a restaurant at night. It really just kind of depends on what the vibe of the space is and what the budget of images is. So if we're spreading out 30 images and they've allotted, 3 or 4 to a space, sometimes I make money by upcharging by saying, look, I really think we need a couple extra shots of this. We might be able to subtract the shot from this space and apply it to this one or whatever to kind of help my client get the most of the space. But I did a beautiful, the lobby of this, I shot a Hilton in Culver City, and some of those are not on my website, also on my Instagram. And beautiful space, beautiful restaurant, had a great vibe at night, but very much a day restaurant. Sure. Like the light just comes in, it feels the space like. Could I have shot it at night and got a beautiful shot? Probably. But if we've only got 4 shots to allot to the space, what's the best time of day for those 4 shots? So that's how I tend to look at it.
Yeah, no, for sure. We're jumping around a little bit here, but a quick question for you. When I don't know how much work you do outside of the United States, but when you are commissioned to go to another country, how do you deal with the legalities of stuff like work visa? Are you there as a tourist? How are you doing that?
The easy answer to that, I have not yet been privileged to work outside the United States.
Okay.
I would love to. I'm waiting. I would love to shoot some stuff in other countries because there's some really beautiful hotels that aren't kind of bound to a cookie cutter. There's trends in America and then there's trends everywhere else.
Yeah.
And I like a lot of the trends that are happening here, but I also like a lot of the trends I see in properties around the world. So, um, I think, yeah, I just haven't had to deal with it. So,
Okay. Yeah. No, that
not,
sounds good.
but I would love to.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know that's the dream, right? Well, we're coming up on 2 hours, so
Oh,
Dylan,
yeah.
I really appreciate your valuable time spending it with
Oh,
me. Thank you
dude,
so
it's my
much.
pleasure.
Your
My pleasure.
photography is absolutely beautiful, and if anyone watching this hasn't had a chance to check it out, dylanpatrick.com. I know you've got a separate URL for your hospitality stuff. You keep those distinct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's important, honestly, for any photographer, if you're doing, two very different. For a while, in fact, I think Dylan Patrick Aviation links to the aviation site for the same reason. For a while, I had way too many,
Hmm.
and I kind of simplified it down to hospitality. But yeah, it's important to just to specify those things because it is two very different audiences.
Yeah. Oh, and we've lost my camera.
We talked so long, I broke your camera. No,
I am now gone.
no, it really was fun. And thank you so much for the kind words. I had a great time chatting with you, though.
Thank you so much for your time, Dylan. Really a pleasure, honestly.
Yeah.
That's great.
Anytime, anything I can do to help or you got questions, let me know. And I absolutely love your work. I really do. And you've captured, the architecture within Kelowna and your hospitality stuff. I mean, it's really beautiful stuff.
Thank you. That's very kind.
So
of you to
I'm
say.
also honored to speak with you because we all need to get together and have a beer.
Yes, we definitely do in LA. I think. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
you said you don't want to be in New York because of winters. I wouldn't recommend Canada.
Well, I'm starting to miss it, oddly enough now. But yeah, if you ever find yourself down, we'll call up Mike and
Yeah.
go, rattle his cage or something.
Sounds perfect. Yeah. No, that's great. Thanks a lot, Dylan.
All right, have a good day.
You as well. Take care.
Bye bye.